Well, last year around this time, I uploaded a video about Aaron Sorkin and his delusional views of reality, and uh, the Newsroom is on again, and so watching the episodes again causes me to become very compelled to make some kind of video, some kind of um, cathartic way to deal with what you see going on there. The writing in his shows I always think is really good in the terms it's witty. The characters are depicted as being very intelligent, very conversational, very well read, um, to an unrealistic level, I think, because they're kind of George R. Martin talks about how Tyrion is so smart, but the only way he's able to be as witty as he is because J.R.R. Martin takes a lot of time to think about something that Tyrion's going to say, and then presents it as him, replying instantly, an immediate quib or comeback in a conversation when it could have taken Martin hours, weeks, or even months. I mean, he could improve it a year later even. Um, and this is kind of what you have with the Newsroom. Um, so there was a particular scene, two scenes right in a row, that really struck me, and it kind of demonstrates. It's hard to say when you see a show like this. Are the views of the actors of the characters in the show, are they the views of the writers? Are they simply characters who are made to espouse certain views? Um, and with Aaron Sorkin, we have a decent idea what his views actually are, and so I often get the impression, if other people get this impression too, let me know, that when certain characters give basically monologues or speeches, much of the time they are they are speaking for Aaron Sorkin. He is expressing his political ideas through the words of his characters. And it's not always his ideas. Sometimes I think he does do devil advocacy where he'll have I mean there's a speech, and I don't remember this because I'm gay, but in the West Wing where um, the White House, the left wing liberal idealized Clinton presidency of President Bartlett was arguing with a Republican congressman who happened to be gay about the Defense of Marriage Act, and at one point just is like, "Why? How can you be a Republican?" And the gay Republican gave a speech, that was quite witty and convincing as far as it went in terms of the two-party um, false polarity. And I don't think that was Sorkin. I think that was Sorkin saying, "Okay, the Republicans, this is their spiel, and I'm giving it due credit." And that's what you get in his work is there's a lot of respect and deference paid to the two political ideas which are uniform on most issues and only barely distinguishably different and only rhetorically different in a few areas, and then everything else, if it's mentioned at all, which it normally isn't, is dismissed out of hand. And there was a great scene illustrating this, and I think it illustrates what the characters say, even if it's not what Aaron Sorkin really thinks or the other writers, it's what a lot of liberals do think. And what happened was the reporters were walking down the street, going to the bar after a hard day of covering the Romney campaign. And there was one of the people covering the campaign was behind them, and she was kind of the tag along girl. And they asked her, "Why are you doing this? Why do you want to report?" And she wanted to report because she loves Ron Paul. And the way she is depicted is totally inane, totally unintellectual, totally uninformed. When they're having the dinner table, they're having a debate about, I forget exactly, some kind of financial policy, Romney's plan or whatever. And she just starts saying, we don't need the Fed, we just need liberty. And it just was depicted to be so ridiculous. This was just some stupid kid who they didn't belong at the big boy table, which is the way not just libertarianism, but all other ideologies are kind of that shouldn't even be entertained. The only difference now is there's so much popularity, and I mean that in relative terms. I'm not saying everyone's libertarian, but there's so much of it that you can't ignore it and just pretend that it doesn't exist. So it gets this treatment. But what was interesting is the character played by Patel, the Indian actor, um, basically, and I think he was speaking for Sorkin at this point, explains why Ron Paul should be dismissed. And the reason is because of the newsletter. The newsletters that he published, even though he didn't write them, he did publish them and he did sell them and he did display them, and that these letters are racist. Now, I think that this was a bad call on Ron Paul's part, and like I don't think I don't think that I need to jump through a lot of hoops to try and pretend like there wasn't anything bad going on. But let's just, for the sake of argument, just accept that these newsletters are racist, even though by and large they weren't really about race and he didn't write them. But whatever, let's just assume, you know. And then he says, I don't care how much he's against the war on drugs. He's racist. He's just a crazy fool. Um, I have never seen any evidence presented by anyone or even suggested any suggestion that anything Ron Paul said or did caused any harm to any black person at all, or any person for that matter. I don't know of anyone. There's no evidence that George Zimmerman, for instance, was a subscriber to Ron Paul's newsletters, read them, and then went on a vigilante act to kill Trayvon Martin. None. Or anyone like Zimmerman at any point. The supposedly racist advice, and let's just assume and accept that it is racist anti-black advice, was never followed by anybody or any evidence that his advice, assuming that's even his, was ever followed. The war on drugs, on the other hand, has a very definite effect and has a very, very clear racial element. Even if the intention is not to be racist, the effect is, in a sense, a war on blacks, especially urban blacks. Uh, Never mind all the other things the government does to hurt blacks, like aborting them to the tune of half of all of them that don't die normally, and paying black women to be single mothers and then have, make their children have a high probability of becoming screwed up and being targeted with welfare that entails extreme moral hazard and engenders laziness and keeps them in poverty. Ignoring all that, the war on drugs is bashing down the doors of uh, African Americans and killing African Americans and imprisoning African Americans and impoverishing African Americans to the tune of a third of their entire male population. Uh, Not all of them getting killed, but a huge segment of the population. It is completely absurd to compare the two in terms of harm. There is no demonstrable harm to Ron Paul's newsletters or anything Ron Paul has ever said or advocated. The war on drugs is it's worse. It causes more black death and misery than slavery did. Now, there's more black people, and so the relative amount of destruction isn't as great. Because there were only 4 million blacks in America in 1865, and almost all of them were enslaved. 90%, a very high percentage. Uh, and nowadays, not all of them are victimized by the drug war, but the percentage is large, and their total numbers are much larger. So a third of the blacks is over 10 million people. And it's more than a third who are harmed by this. Because even the ones who don't get murdered or convicted get profiled by the police. It's funny how we're always, oh yeah, the business owner who doesn't like the black guy. So the worst thing that happens is they get glared at a little bit. And then the police pull you over. And even if all they do is pull you over and they don't even write you a ticket, that's worse than all the glares you can ever get at the lunch counter. But then they probably will write you a ticket and maybe beat the crap out of you and throw you in prison too. So I think that's a little bit worse. So, the scale of values here is that Ron Paul's out of the question because he's racist, even though he's against policies that are demonstrably racist. And the other candidates who all support the war on drugs, whether that's all the other Republicans or all the Democrats like Obama, specifically, they get a pass. That's not even an issue. The fact that they don't do anything that is rhetorically racist, whereas Ron Paul did do some things that are rhetorically racist. It doesn't matter that, in effect, what Obama or Bush or any of the other mainstream candidates who are taken seriously, the fact that what they advocate and do, I mean, we're to the point where Obama's not advocating this, he's doing this. His Justice Department is persecuting not just blacks, but large numbers of blacks. And that's okay, but Ron Paul's not okay because of his newsletter. And the irony here is just that they can say this and not even realize how ridiculous it is. And this isn't even going into issues like the war. And this is the other kind of misnomer here. It's funny coming from the mouth of a liberal where, well, Ron Paul, he just cares about legalizing drugs. That's what the social conservatives say to Ron Paul. That's what, when they want to dismiss him, they say he just wants to legalize drugs. And of course, that's true. He does, correctly. And if you care about racism, the number one thing you need to talk about is the war on drugs. But his number one issue, I think it's fair to say, is the war issue. That's what he talks about the most. That's where he garnered the most support. That's where he's the most outstanding. Um, and that was not the issue that Patel and Sorkin and those of his ilk think of. They don't want to debate that issue. It's because they can't. Because he's a rebuke of their entire existence in that regard. All these liberals, oh, I'm peace, give peace a chance, the Obama with a peace sign and a bumper sticker, feel good, not thinking, moron voting public sheeple. Ron Paul is actually for peace. And so it is a rebuke of their entire professed ideology. And so rather than even debate it, which the Republicans will debate it because they don't profess to be anything other than hawks and bloodthirsty murderers, most of them, not all, but most. Uh, but the liberals and the Democrats, they can't engage on that level because he is what they say they want to be and are clearly not. And then the next issue that's also bigger than drugs would have to be his views on fiscal policy and the Fed. Although they tipped the hat to the extent that they said that they had the retarded character who represents aberrant political ideas mention abolishing the Fed. No attempt was made to actually debate that concept. It is just simply taken for granted. And they have other parts in the series where people who are explicitly declared to be super intelligent, super capable, go on to litanies as to why the debt ceiling needs to be raised, why spending needs to be increased all the time, blah, 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 without any kind of refutation. It's also interesting here, the premise of the show is that the producers and the main host, Jeff Daniels of the Newsroom, want to produce a well-informed electorate. That's the whole motivation of their existence. That's what they're going for. And that, when they find politicians who are doing things that are demonstrably wrong, they're going to alert the public about them, and then they're going to vote those people out. If you, and the one lady says, if you mess with the full faith and credit of the United States, then you lose your job. And this is there's no basis in reality that this is how it works. Politicians do get removed from office, and if they do, it's because they showed their penis to an intern or got caught having sex with a gay hooker or something like that. Or they run against somebody who's really popular and famous, something along those lines. It is highly unusual that they get voted out for anything other than partisan or superficial reasons. It is almost never for strong ideological differences. And how they're arriving at what they decide is right, is wrong, is never really explained. It's just kind of taken for granted that the debt ceiling should be raised, that Congress passing laws is a good thing. He chides the Congress for doing nothing, quote unquote, not passing enough things. Congressmen who are unelected, there's one scene last year where a longtime congressman gets unelected due to the Tea Party, and he's just, oh, I'm sorry, you passed so many laws, so this is bad. Because a politician who passes a lot of laws is a good politician, and politicians who don't pass a lot of laws, well, they're no good. Um, Taking for granted that passing laws is a good thing, without even examining what those laws are. So it's funny how they can be so dismissive, but yet bring nothing to the argument. Um, and it's kind of ironic where you have a president who's killing, thousands of brown people. And at one point, to the show's credit, they talk about the drone strikes and the killing and the assassinations of Americans. There's a character, a visiting producer, who, at several points testifies to this effect. And he even says, and you guys are giving him a pass because you like him. But then they make that character out to be a liar. He does an interview with somebody and he edits it to be disingenuous. I don't know if that's. I don't think that was probably an explicit attempt to discredit whistleblowers or anything. I think that was probably more of just a plot point. But still, I actually kind of doubt that conversation is ever had, because the amount of deference given to the president and the government generally does not reflect the people who are creating the news ever consider things in those terms. If they ever consider it murder or homicide, there is such a benefit of the doubt to the point of they can do anything, and even like, oh, I don't know, that's out of line. That's not being deferential enough. And if you seriously criticize them in very strong, unambiguous rhetorical terms, then you're just a quack and you're not even at the table. You shouldn't even be listened to. You don't even belong in the same room. You know, that's the implication, and it's very frustrating. And I wonder, how many years Sorkin's been doing this forever. I mean, you can even see this stuff when he did A Few Good Men, and that was a long time ago, and that probably wasn't the beginning either. And it's not Sorkin. Sorkin is here kind of a stand-in for the liberal elite, the people who are so smug in their superiority and so sophisticated yet so utterly stupid and hypocritical that you can barely hold your nose to it. So I don't know. I think I'm watching this show because I have some kind of masochistic desire. I mean, it's kind of slightly interesting to see something that's probably a better depiction of the actual physical workings of the television cable media than anything else you'll see on TV, which of course isn't really saying anything. Um, and it's also good to kind of see how these people think. Their view of the world. Ron Paul is a crazy person, and his ideas are crazy, and they're offhand rejected. And the reasons they're rejected are, even if we believe them at their face value, are so infinitesimally less bad than the actual policies that they fully endorse and respect as to be mind-numbingly ironic. So that's pretty much it, and I'll talk to you all later.